And beginning our show, grain marketing has a unique language that depicts specific information. And that language can be confusing to those who are new to farming and those with decades of experience. Market Journal's Bill Dodd caught up with Extension Educator for Agricultural Economics, Jessica Groskopf, to get a better feel for grain marketing lingo.
Trading commodities is a profession that dates back much farther than the trading of stocks and bonds. However, with time comes change. In the modern marketplace, commodities are still exchanged around the world, but one of the most important assets in the toolbox of a fledgling commodity marketer these days is using proper resources and knowing the market lingo.
Yeah, so getting started in grain marketing, it's really important to start to learn the lingo. And the best way to do that is to subscribe to your elevator's local text messages. So they'll text you 2 to 3 times per day with the local prices. And that will also get you used to what the prices are currently doing. I think there's a lot of resources out there related to grain marketing. Nebraska Extension is always available to help you understand more. In fact, we also host workshops on a regular basis. I also encourage you to look at the CME group. They have a great knowledge base that's out there that has educational videos that can help you get started in grain marketing. Another thing that I really encourage folks to do when they're starting out is actually to work with their family and actually take some bushels on. So maybe look at 10 to 15% of your farm's operation if you're able to market that yourself. And that's a really good way to get your feet wet without diving in and taking over completely. So saying, can I take 5 or 10,000 bushels and market them this year? That's a really great way to learn. And each year taking on just a little bit more.
When it comes to making sense of marketing lingo, let's start at the beginning and discuss how to identify commodity codes and contract information when viewing your resources.
So just like other trading platforms like the NASDAQ or the S&P 500 have a code that they use for companies, the CME group has codes for commodities. And basically it allows us to identify what the contract is that is trading based on a few characters, usually 4 or 5 characters. So for each month, there is actually a letter that's associated with that month. So going back to the example of the December contract, it's always noted as a Z. So I actually like to look at commodity codes backwards and start with the numbers. The numbers indicate the year, and then the letter immediately next to those numbers is the month. And so we're looking at that month, and commodities have different months that they trade. Again, corn has 5 contracts. And so if we're looking at March, that letter associated with it will be H. And the month contracts are always consistent.
Available contract expiration months will vary by product. As such, some commodities will naturally be more fluid than others. It's imperative to learn to watch and adapt to how and when those changes will be most advantageous.
Yeah, so corn and wheat have 5 contracts per year. And what we're looking for is the contract that's closest to harvest. We'll call the new crop contract. So for corn, that is the December contract. So we're watching that because when we come and deliver our grain in the fall, that's the contract they're going to be pricing off of. So for a lot of the year, we're actually watching the current contract, and we're watching whatever that new crop contract is, depending on the commodity that we produce and where we're at in the country. So we have to think about the fact that commodities are consumed year round, but only delivered once per year at harvest. So what the commodity months do is allow us to price those commodities at specific intervals throughout the year based on how those commodities are used. So let's flip the script a little bit and say, instead of being a grain producer, I'm a feed yard. So I know I'm going to have to feed those cattle year round. So I want to price that grain for when it's delivered. And so for, again, wheat and corn, there's 5 contracts. And for soybeans, there's actually 7 different contracts. So, from somebody who's actually using that product as an input, that allows me to price that grain throughout the year on a more consistent basis. So it just takes a little bit of getting used to how they manage those contracts. So the more contracts that a commodity has, probably the more liquid that commodity is.
Understanding the lingo is a big step in learning commodity marketing. However, when it comes to marketing, there are always potential missteps new and experienced marketers may take.
Yeah, so Marketers often actually don't use the contracts months when they're actually discussing them. So they'll talk about the new crop contract, or they'll talk about today's price, and they're not noting what contracts they're actually discussing. So it's really important that you understand how the contracts not only are labeled, but then also how a elevator or a processor will use them. So for example, even though the December corn contract expires on the 14th of the month, or the day before the business day of the 14th of the month, they actually won't quote that for the last basically 2 weeks. So you'll actually stop quoting the December price at the end of November and roll, which is a great phrase, to the next contract. So it takes a lot of time just to kind of understand what contract that they're quoting and how they're utilizing those to set the prices.
As long as you're willing to familiarize yourself with the marketing lingo and are reasonably aware of common pitfalls in marketing, you're well on your way to taking your first steps in becoming a successful grain marketer. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.